Welcome back to our channel, Soap Opera Enthusiasts. Today is a beautiful day to dive deep into the glamorous, yet treacherous world of Los Angeles fashion and family dynasties. Grab your favorite cup of coffee, settle in, and let us explore the latest explosive developments that are about to shake the very foundations of our beloved characters' lives. The atmosphere within the glittering, glass-paneled walls of Forrester Creations has always been one of intense pressure masquerading as high art. But for Electra Forrester, the air has recently become entirely unbreathable. Following the explosive revelation of her Aunt Ivy Forrester's deceitful machinations, Electra was thrust into a position of immense power and crushing responsibility. Ridge Forrester's decision to hand her the reins of the prestigious jewelry line was meant to be a triumphant promotion, a vote of confidence in her inherent talent and resilience. Instead, it became a gilded cage. The sheer magnitude of the role, overseeing intricate designs, managing temperamental suppliers, and ensuring every single gemstone met the impossibly high Forrester standard, proved to be an overwhelming burden for someone with such minimal executive experience. Electra found herself drowning in a sea of endless spreadsheets, late-night international conference calls, and the relentless demand for absolute perfection. The glamorous facade of the fashion industry quickly peeled away, leaving behind a grueling reality that began to slowly erode her physical and mental well-being. Compounding this unbearable professional strain was the lingering, toxic residue of Ivy's psychological warfare. Even though Ivy had agreed to step away from the company, masking her disgraceful exit under the guise of maternity leave, the shadows of her manipulation still haunted Electra's every waking moment. The betrayal by her own blood had left deep, festering wounds in Electra's psyche. She was constantly second-guessing her own judgment, paranoid that another unseen adversary was lurking just around the corner, waiting to tear down whatever fragile stability she had managed to build. The late nights in the design office blurred together into a dizzying nightmare of exhaustion. Electra's normally vibrant complexion grew pale and drawn, her eyes shadowed by dark circles that no amount of expensive concealer could hide. She was running on empty, fueled only by a desperate, frantic need to prove herself worthy of the Forrester name and to ensure that Ivy's attempts to destroy her life had been entirely in vain. But the human body can only endure so much punishment before it demands a reckoning, and Electra was rapidly approaching her absolute breaking point. Yet, the most agonizing weight pressing down on Electra's fragile shoulders was not the jewelry line, nor was it Ivy's betrayal. It was a dark, suffocating secret buried deep within her own heart, a secret involving R.J. Forrester. During the darkest days of her separation from Logan-Spencer, when Ivy's intercepted letters and whispered lies had convinced Electra that Will had abandoned her for Melissa Dillon, Electra had experienced a moment of profound, devastating weakness. In her overwhelming grief and vulnerability, she had sought comfort in the familiar, intoxicating presence of R.J. That single, passionate encounter had been a desperate attempt to feel something other than the piercing agony of a broken heart. When the truth about Ivy's sabotage finally came to light, Electra had frantically tried to sweep that transgression under the rug, throwing herself back into Will's arms and praying that the ghosts of her mistakes would remain forever buried. She smiled for Will, she accepted his forgiveness, but internally she was consumed by a rotting guilt that threatened to consume her from the inside out. The inevitable collapse did not happen with a dramatic flourish, but rather with a terrifying, silent finality. It was late in the evening, long after the bustling corridors of Forrester Creations had emptied out, leaving only the hum of the air conditioning and the distant glow of the city lights outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Electra was standing over her drafting table, her trembling fingers desperately trying to perfect the intricate setting of a diamond necklace. Suddenly, the brilliant sketches beneath her hands began to blur and swim. A deafening, high-pitched ringing filled her ears, drowning out the ambient noise of the office. The room tilted violently on its axis, She tried to reach out, to grasp the edge of the heavy mahogany desk to steady herself, but her limbs felt like lead. The air was suddenly sucked from her lungs, replaced by a crushing, agonizing pressure in her chest. With a soft, barely audible gasp, Electra's eyes rolled back, and she crumpled to the floor, her delicate frame hitting the unforgiving hardwood with a sickening thud. The sketches scattered around her like fallen leaves, a tragic tableau of ambition and exhaustion. The discovery of her unconscious body set off a chaotic, terrifying chain of events. When Logan-Spencer, who had returned to the building to surprise her with a late dinner, found her lying motionless on the floor, his entire world stopped spinning. The sheer panic that gripped his heart was unlike anything he had ever experienced. He fell to his knees, his hands shaking violently as he frantically checked for a pulse, screaming her name into the empty, echoing office. The subsequent ambulance ride was a blur of flashing red sirens, the sterile smell of antiseptic, and the urgent, clipped voices of the paramedics. Will held Electra's cold, lifeless hand in a death grip, his eyes fixed on her pale face, silently bargaining with any higher power that would listen. He promised everything, offered his own life in exchange for hers, his mind entirely consumed by the absolute terror of losing the woman he had only just managed to win back. The journey to the hospital felt like an eternity, every passing second stretching into a grueling lifetime of fear and uncertainty. Upon arriving at the emergency room, the clinical, detached efficiency of the medical staff only heightened Will's profound sense of helplessness. He was unceremoniously pushed behind a set of swinging double doors, forced to pace the length of a sterile, brightly lit waiting room, while a team of doctors rushed Electra into an examination bay. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting long, distorted shadows against the pale green walls. Will ran his hands through his hair, his breathing ragged and shallow. Every time a nurse walked past, his heart leaped into his throat, anticipating the worst possible news. He thought about their recent reconciliation, the tentative but beautiful steps they had taken toward rebuilding their shattered trust. He thought about the radiant smile she had given him just that morning, completely unaware of the immense physical and emotional torment she was silently enduring. The agony of waiting was a physical torture, a slow, methodical shredding of his nerves that left him entirely raw and exposed. When the attending physician finally emerged through the double doors, the grim, somber expression on his face instantly drained the blood from Will's veins. The doctor's voice was gentle, measured, and entirely devastating. He explained that Electra had suffered a severe physical collapse brought on by extreme stress, exhaustion, and malnourishment. But that was merely the prologue to the true tragedy. With a heavy sigh, the doctor revealed the underlying cause of her sudden, catastrophic medical crisis. Electra had been pregnant, and the immense trauma her body had endured had resulted in a spontaneous miscarriage. The words hung in the sterile air, heavy and suffocating. Pregnant. Miscarriage. Will stumbled backward, his back hitting the cold, hard wall of the corridor as his knees threatened to buckle beneath him. The sheer magnitude of the revelation struck him with the force of a freight train, shattering his reality into a million jagged, irreparable pieces. The grief that washed over Will was absolute and entirely consuming. He had lost a child he had not even known existed until the very moment it was taken away forever. A profound, hollow ache blossomed in the center of his chest, a void that threatened to swallow him whole. He thought of the future that had just been violently erased, the laughter of a child echoing through the beach house, the tiny hands holding onto his fingers, the beautiful, terrifying journey of parenthood that he and Electra were supposed to embark upon together. Tears streamed down his face, hot and unchecked, as he mourned the profound loss of a life that had ended before it had even truly begun. His heart broke not only for himself but for Electra, knowing the unimaginable pain and sorrow she would face when she woke up and learned that the ultimate price of her relentless ambition and the toxic Forrester environment had been the life of their unborn child. When Will was finally allowed into Electra's hospital room, the sight of her small, fragile form enveloped in the stark white linens nearly broke him all over again. She was awake, her eyes wide and vacant, staring blankly at the ceiling. The doctor had already delivered the devastating news. As Will approached the bed, a single, silent tear slipped down Electra's cheek, a testament to the unfathomable depth of her despair. He sat beside her, gently taking her hand in his, offering no words, because there were simply no words in existence that could bridge the chasm of their shared tragedy. They sat in a suffocating, heavy silence, the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor the only sound in the room. Will poured every ounce of his love and strength into his grip, desperately trying to anchor her to the present, to assure her that they would navigate this horrific nightmare together. He was prepared to be her rock, her sanctuary, her unwavering support in the darkest chapter of her young life. But fate, in its infinite, cruel irony, had one final, devastating card to play. After an hour of holding vigil by her side, Will stepped out of the room to get a cup of water, needing a brief moment to compose himself and wipe the exhaustion from his eyes. As he walked past the nurse's station, his gaze inadvertently fell upon a medical chart resting haphazardly on the counter. The bold, black letters spelling out Electra's name caught his attention. Driven by a desperate, protective need to understand everything about her condition, Will stepped closer, his eyes scanning the clinical jargon and laboratory results. He was not looking for anything specific, just trying to grasp the medical reality of what had happened to the woman he loved. However, as his eyes drifted down to the section detailing the fetal tissue analysis and maternal blood work, a specific set of data points leaped off the page, instantly freezing the blood in his veins and stopping the breath in his lungs. Will stared at the blood type documentation, his mind struggling to process the stark, undeniable biological impossibility printed in black and white. He knew his own blood type. He knew Electra's. And the blood type recorded for the miscarried fetus was entirely, fundamentally incompatible with his own genetic makeup. The letters and positive-negative markers stared back at him like a cruel, mocking riddle. For a moment, the world around him simply ceased to exist. The bustling hospital corridor, the ringing telephones, the chatter of the medical staff, it all faded into a dull, distant hum. We'll read the lines again, and then a third time, his brain frantically searching for a clerical error, a typo, a misunderstanding. But the cold, hard science of hematology does not lie. The irrefutable truth began to seep into his consciousness like a dark, creeping poison. The child that Electra had just lost, the child he had been mourning with every fiber of his being, could not possibly have been his. A violent tremor seized Will's hands as he gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles turning white. His internal monologue became a chaotic, terrifying storm of denial and realization. He whispered frantically to himself, his eyes darting wildly across the page, praying that the lab had mixed up the samples or the doctor had written it down wrong. But even as he desperately tried to construct a narrative of medical incompetence, the logical, analytical part of his brain, the part inherited from his ruthless father, Bill Spencer, began to ruthlessly dismantle his denial. He remembered the timeline. He remembered the weeks they had spent apart, the weeks when Ivy had successfully poisoned Electra's mind against him. He remembered the strange, lingering looks between Electra and R.J. Forrester since they had reunited. The pieces of a horrifying, devastating puzzle were rapidly snapping into place, forming a picture so grotesque and painful that Will felt physically nauseous. Unable to contain the raging tempest within his soul, Will cornered the attending physician in the hallway, his voice a low, dangerous growl that commanded immediate attention. He shoved the medical file toward the doctor, his fingers stabbing violently at the blood type analysis. He demanded an explanation, his eyes blazing with a terrifying intensity, insisting to know how this genetic outcome was medically possible. The doctor, taken aback by the sudden, aggressive confrontation, adjusted his glasses and reviewed the chart. With a clinical, detached professionalism that only served to fuel Will's escalating fury, the doctor confirmed the data. He explained the basic principles of genetics, confirming without a shadow of a doubt that based on Will's documented blood type, he could not be the biological father of the fetus. The doctor's words were the final, fatal blow to Will's crumbling reality. The confirmation was absolute. There was no margin for error, no glimmer of hope to cling to. The betrayal was real, documented, and undeniable. The halls of Forrester Creations have always been hallowed ground, a sanctuary where the greatest minds in the fashion industry have historically come together to weave dreams into reality. For decades, the towering glass edifice has stood as a monument to elegance, innovation, and familial loyalty. However, the atmosphere within these iconic walls has undergone a drastic and chilling transformation under the increasingly authoritarian rule of Steffi Forrester. What was once a collaborative utopia has rapidly devolved into a draconian regime, where creative freedom is routinely sacrificed at the altar of Steffi's absolute control. The air in the executive suites is thick with tension, fear, and a suffocating sense of marginalization. Steffi, wielding her power with an iron fist, has made it abundantly clear that Forrester Creations is her kingdom, and anyone who does not fall perfectly in line with her rigid vision is entirely expendable. This oppressive management style has created a toxic environment that is slowly but surely poisoning the creative wellspring of the company, setting the stage for a catastrophic internal rebellion. At the epicenter of this corporate suffocation is Hope Logan, a woman who has poured her heart, soul, and undeniable talent into building the Hope for the Future line into a global phenomenon. For years, Hope has been a pillar of Forrester Creations, championing ethical fashion and bringing a fresh, youthful energy to the legacy brand. Yet, under Steffi's current administration, Hope has found herself systematically humiliated and pushed into the darkest corners of the company. Her innovative designs are dismissed, her budgets are slashed, and her creative input is treated with blatant disdain. Steffi's deliberate campaign to marginalize Hope is not merely a business strategy. It is a deeply personal vendetta, a manifestation of the decades-old Forrester versus Logan rivalry playing out in the boardroom. Every time Hope attempts to present a new vision, she is met with a wall of cold, calculated rejection. The psychological toll of this relentless humiliation has pushed Hope to the absolute brink, forcing her to question her place within a company that clearly no longer values her immense contributions. Hope is not the only victim of Steffi's tyrannical reign. Deke Sharp, a designer whose raw talent and avant-garde sensibilities have the potential to revolutionize the industry, has also found himself caught in the crosshairs of Steffi's authoritarianism. Deke's creative genius requires space to breathe, to experiment, and to push boundaries, but Steffi's rigid constraints have effectively clipped his wings. He is forced to conform to a sterile, homogenized vision of fashion that betrays his artistic integrity. Together, Hope and Deke share a profound sense of alienation and frustration. They are two of the brightest creative minds in Los Angeles, yet they are being treated as glorified assistants by a CEO who is blinded by her own ego and historical prejudices. The shared trauma of their marginalization has forged a quiet but unbreakable bond between them, a mutual understanding that their talents are being squandered in an environment that actively seeks to diminish their light. They are a powder keg of suppressed creativity, just waiting for the right spark to ignite. Across town, a very different narrative is unfolding within the sleek, modern corridors of the Spencer Publications empire. Katie Logan-Spencer and Bill Spencer are currently riding the crest of an unprecedented wave of success. Their newly established Logan fashion brand has just launched its debut collection, utilizing the brilliant, albeit controversial, designs of Eric Forrester. The launch has been nothing short of a global sensation, with their marketing campaign dominating billboards from New York to Paris. The Logan brand has instantly established itself as a formidable player in the luxury fashion market, striking fear into the hearts of their competitors. However, Katie and Bill are seasoned business moguls who understand that a single successful collection does not guarantee long-term survival. With Forrester no longer an option for future designs, they are acutely aware that they need to secure a visionary lead designer to sustain their momentum. They need a creative powerhouse who can not only match the quality of their debut, but elevate the Logan brand to entirely new heights. It is in this moment of strategic desperation that Bill Spencer's legendary predatory instincts kick in. Bill, always a master of reading the corporate landscape, recognizes the brewing catastrophe at Forrester Creations. He sees the cracks in Steffi's armor and the immense talent that she is foolishly alienating. When he and Katie realize the depth of Hope and Deke's humiliation, they immediately recognize the opportunity of a lifetime. This is not just a chance to acquire top-tier talent. It is an opportunity to strike a devastating, potentially fatal blow to Forrester Creations. Katie, driven by a fierce loyalty to her family and a burning desire to solidify her brand's dominance, fully supports the initiative. They meticulously craft an irresistible pitch, a lifeline designed to pull Hope and Deke out of the suffocating darkness of Steffi's regime and into the blinding light of total creative liberation. The secret meeting between the Logan-Spencer alliance and the disillusioned Forrester designers is a masterclass in corporate seduction. Bill and Katie do not just offer money. They offer respect, autonomy, and an unlimited canvas upon which Hope and Deke can paint their masterpieces. Katie speaks directly to Hope's wounded pride, reminding her of her intrinsic value and the legacy of the Logan name. She paints a vivid picture of a fashion empire where hope for the future can evolve without constraints, where her ethical vision can be realized without compromise. Bill, playing the role of the ultimate facilitator, assures Deke that his avant-garde sensibilities will not only be welcomed, but celebrated as the cornerstone of the new Logan aesthetic. They offer equity, creative control, and the promise of a supportive environment that stands in stark contrast to the toxic battleground of Forrester Creations. For Hope and Deke, the offer is nothing short of a revelation. It is a validation of their worth and a beacon of hope in what had become a deeply depressing professional existence. The decision to leave Forrester Creations is agonizing for Hope. The company is intrinsically tied to her history, her family, and her identity. Walking away means severing ties with a legacy she helped build and stepping into the unknown. Yet, the memory of Steffi's sneering dismissals and the constant, grinding humiliation ultimately tips the scales. Hope realizes that loyalty to a company that actively despises her is not noble. It is self-destructive. Deke, less burdened by familial ties, but equally desperate for artistic freedom, is ready to sign the contract the moment it is presented. When they finally put pen to paper, aligning themselves with the Logan empire, they are not just changing employers. They are firing the first shots in what will undoubtedly become the most vicious corporate war the Los Angeles fashion industry has ever witnessed. They are reclaiming their power and setting the stage for a monumental shift in the industry's balance of power. The moment the news of Hope and Deke's defection breaks, a shockwave of apocalyptic proportions rips through the halls of Forrester Creations. The sheer audacity of the move leaves the entire executive team paralyzed with disbelief. When Steffi is finally informed that her two most prominent, albeit marginalized, designers have jumped ship to join her most hated rival, her reaction is a terrifying spectacle of incandescent rage. The illusion of her absolute control is shattered into a million jagged pieces. Steffi views this not merely as a business loss, but as a profound, unforgivable blood betrayal. In her mind, Hope has not just resigned. She has committed treason against the Forrester family. The realization that Katie and Bill have successfully poached her talent using the very vulnerability she created is a bitter pill that Steffi absolutely refuses to swallow. Her pride is deeply wounded,